Welcome. Today, David and Goliath, Part 1, in which David first expresses publicly his faith in God. I suppose the story of David and Goliath is the most well-known of all children's Bible stories, except, of course, it's not a story, it is a history of how Israel's greatest king came to prominence. And nor is it particularly a children's Bible story, for although David was a youth at this time, although he was a teenager probably in today's terms, it's not really a story for children. It's a story of a battle. It's a story of a violent fight. Yes, I know we like to use this as an example of how someone smaller and weaker can overcome someone fierce and powerful. Yet that didn't happen by David's strength as a youngster. No, that happened because David was looking to God to fight his battle for him. So today we're going to be looking at the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 17. And because the chapter is long, we're splitting it into two sections. And today's section is the first 30 verses of that chapter. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England, presenting these talks on how to understand the King James Bible, looking each time at a different section, word by word and verse by verse, seeking to understand its meaning. So if you're able, please turn with me today to the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 17, and verses 1 to 30. And verse 1 begins with the description of where the battle would take place. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochar, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shochar and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. Where were these places? We don't know precisely nowadays, but we're given a strong clue in verse 2. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. The valley of Elah. Now this is the borderland between Israel and Philistia. The valley of Elah was a river which ran during the winter and, like most of Israel's rivers, dried up during the summer months. And the description is of a battle that takes place on this dried up riverbed. It's north of the great cities of the Philistines, and there we've got the two sides gathering together. Saul set the battle in array. That means that he arranged his army for the battle. He wanted certain soldiers to be ready to go in first. He wanted them to be supported, presumably, by men who would fire arrows with their bows at the Philistines. He arranged everything so that everything was ready for the battle to begin. Verse 3. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. I've discussed the dried up riverbed. What about these mountains? We wouldn't really call them mountains today. They're too low. What we're saying is that on the high ground on one side of this dried up riverbed, that was where the Philistines had arranged their army. And on the other side, across from the valley, that was where Israel organised its army. And they were ready for a war. But that war did not begin because, in verse 4, And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. What's happened here is that there leaves the camp of the Philistines their strongest and most impressive man. He is called, of course, Goliath. He comes from one of the cities of the Philistines, which was called Gath. His height is given here as the extraordinary height of 6 cubits and a span. Well, a cubit means the length of a man's forearm. It measures about 18 inches, half a metre. And the span means the spread of a man's fingers when the hand is stretched out. So what we're talking about in reality would measure by those measurements today about 9 foot, although I've described the cubit by reference to the lengths of parts of the body. And of course, that varies from person to person. So how tall was Goliath really? Or does it matter to us at all? The point that the Bible passage is making is not to be a sort of book of records, not to impress us with amazing and wonderful statistics. The Bible is trying to be practical and give us a viewpoint of this tremendously impressive man. And of course, when you see someone tremendously strong, the height is only part of what impresses you. If someone is high but very thin, that person does not impress you with their height. But if they are high and well proportioned with massive muscles, that impresses you. So how does Goliath measure to 6 cubits and a span from the point of view of someone who is looking on? He's not measured the man, and certainly not measuring him against his forearm. No, what we say is that a normal man, because people were small in those days, would measure between 3 or 4 cubits for someone who was tall. This man was taller than that. So was King Saul of Israel. It's said of him that he was head and shoulders above the height of anyone else in Israel. So if the highest men in Israel were 4 cubits tall, maybe they referred to Saul as being 5 cubits tall. But in the foreign nations, there were people who were even taller than Saul. And we read about a nation of people who produced men of enormous height. If they referred to Saul as 5 cubits, maybe they referred to those men as being 6 cubits tall. But Goliath was tall even among them. His height, therefore, was 6 cubits and a span. And so that's the sort of proportions that Israel's people saw and were weighing up when Goliath came out before them. Verse 5, and he, Goliath, had an helmet of brass upon his head. So that's a metal hat to protect his head from attack. And he was armed with a coat of mail. Mail is little pieces of typically metal that cover a man to protect him. The Hebrew is interesting here because that coat of mail, it describes like fish scales. Yes, it looks like fish scales covering a man. And that's curious because the gods of the Philistines were in the shape of fish. Goliath looked to the Philistines more like a god than a man. And the weight of the coat, that's his coat of mail, his protective armour, was 5,000 shekels of brass. I believe that's about 15 pounds or 7 kilos. Verse 6, and he had greaves of brass upon his legs. That's brass armour, metal armour to protect his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. A target, that really means the protective thing around his neck. He's got his legs protected, he's got his neck protected, his head is protected by the helmet, his body is protected by this coat of mail, and he's got a weapon, a spear to make sure that no one can come near to him. A spear is like a knife on a long pole. Verse 7, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. The staff, the stick, which held the knife at the end. It was like a weaver's beam. I have no idea at all as to how big a weaver's beam is, but in the context, we can imagine that it was massive. A huge piece of wood to hold the spear's head, and that spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, which I'm told is about 15 pounds weight or 7 kilos. It looked so impressive to Israel's people. He looked like a tank. He looked like someone who could never be defeated. And as if that was not enough protection, the end of verse 7 says that one bearing a shield went before him. So there was someone who boldly went in front of Goliath, carrying a great shield to protect him so that Israel's men could not even fire arrows in his direction. Verse 8, and he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said to them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. What's Goliath saying? Why have you come out? Why have you dared to organize your men for battle? I'm proud, I'm great, I am a Philistine. And you lot, all you men of Israel, you are servants to Saul. That word can mean slaves. You are just the slaves of Saul, your king. But I am a free man. I am a Philistine. I am powerful and you are weak. So, if you dare fight against me, then select a man. Select a man and we'll have a token battle to see which side is stronger. The side with the strongest man surely must win in the battle. So let's see which side has the strongest man, Goliath says. Verse 9, if he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. Yes, we'll accept it. We'll accept your rule over us. We'll pay taxes. We'll even be your slaves if only that man can kill me. But, end of verse 9, if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. Let's have an end to this pretense that Israel has a powerful king. The person who's powerful in Israel is the man who can defeat me. And if there is no such man, if your strongest man I can defeat and kill, then Israel should not be a free country. It should be a country that pays taxes to the Philistines. In fact, you should serve us. You should be our slaves. You should be under our control because you are weaker than us. Verse 10, and the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. I dare you to send out the man who can fight against me and defeat me. Verse 11. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. They were afraid? What right had they to be afraid of a man, a foreigner, a servant, a slave of a false god? What right did they, Israel's people who serve the living God, have to be afraid of him? No, the Bible only tells us to be afraid of God. As Psalm 33:8, let all the earth fear the Lord, let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. But Israel's men were afraid of Goliath. Let's introduce David now. Verse 12. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. Okay, so David's family came from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse, his father, is described as an Ephrathite. The other name for Bethlehem is Ephratah. And as we've seen, he has 8 sons. They were referred to in the previous chapter. And he was now an old man. That is why Jesse did not go to war at this time. But his oldest sons were old enough to go and join the army, and that is what they did. Verse 13. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle, and the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next him Aminadab, and the third Shammah. We saw this again in the previous chapter when these brothers were mentioned. The oldest of them, Eliab, was impressive. Chapter 16, verse 7, the Lord said to Samuel, look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature. So Eliab was counted in Israel to be a tall man and to be a strong man and to be an impressive man. And he was there in Israel's army, but he, like all the others, was greatly afraid of Goliath. Verse 14, and David was the youngest, that is to say, the youngest son of Jesse, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. Verse 15, but David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. Again, in the previous chapter, we read how David had been employed by Saul. Saul was troubled by an evil spirit, and so David, as a competent player on the harp, was called to calm Saul down with his playing. And David did this, and the evil spirit would leave Saul, and Saul was refreshed. But no one wanted to calm Saul down when Saul went into battle. They wanted a king who was fierce and angry and cruel. That was why they asked Samuel to appoint Saul in the first place. So David, with his work with the harp to calm down Saul, however useful it was in the palace, in the battlefield, the people considered useless. So David went back and he returned to his old job. He looked after his father's sheep. And the battle was going on, except it didn't happen because of these threats every day that Goliath was making. Verse 16, and the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. For 40 days they waited for the battle to begin. By this time, Israel's men were struggling for supplies. Any army needs supplies of food and everything else that they need. And Jesse is aware of this passage of time, that his sons will have used up the food that they had with them. And so he decides he must send food for David's brothers. Verse 17. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn. An ephah is a basket, or the measure that the basket measures. Parched corn, roasted corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren, to your brothers. Verse 18. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. In Israel's army, for a small army like this, it was usual for there to be 3,000 men. So the captain of 1,000 might be Jonathan, who commanded 1,000 men in a previous battle. You can see that in 1 Samuel 13:2. And Jesse wants a gift to go to that captain, to the leader of the 1,000, so he sends 10 slices of soft cheese for them. Verse 18 continues, And look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Look, check that they're well, check that they're healthy, and take their pledge. And that a pledge is a token of safekeeping. And that's caused some debate amongst the commentators, what that pledge means. 2 main ideas. One is they've been away so long they might have got themselves in debt, sort it out for them, pay off their debts, make sure they're okay. Or maybe with reference to that safekeeping, get a promise that they really are safe and well. Make sure of the fact. Don't just trust them on it. Get a definite promise on it. Verse 19, Now Saul and they, David's brothers, and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. Only they weren't fighting because they were waiting for this battle to begin, and the battle couldn't begin until they dealt with Goliath. Verse 20, And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, someone who was paid to look after the family sheep, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And as he came to the trench, to the path, to the way which was leading up to the battle, as the host, the army, was going forth to the fight and shouted for the battle. So David has arrived there early in the morning, and what he's found is that the men are not just hanging around waiting for the battle. They've been organised and ordered to go up into the battle and to fight. And David probably thinks at that point that he's going to have to join them in the battle. He is a young man, he is from Israel, he is strong. He probably supposes, well, he's too young to join the regular army, but he will do what he can for King Saul and for his country. Verse 21, For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. They'd organised their soldiers. They were all ready for the fight. Verse 22, And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage. His carriage is what he was carrying, the food which he'd been sent to deliver and which he couldn't deliver yet because they were going up to the battle. So he's seeing the situation naturally, leaves these things with the person who's looking after all the possessions of the soldiers. And, end of verse 22, he ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. So he's joined his brothers in the army, ready for this fight. Verse 23, And as he talked with them, with his brothers, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. David heard what this Philistine was saying, and David was angry, but not the men with him. They were not angry. What happened to them? Verse 24, And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, they saw Goliath, fled from him and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, verse 25, Have ye seen this man that is come up? surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. He's defying Israel. He is insulting Israel. But what a fierce man he is, and what a great man. But Saul has promised that if anyone can kill Goliath, that man will become truly rich. He will even marry the daughter of the king, and that the house or the family of the man who kills Goliath will be free from Israel. They'll be free people, free from taxes. They'll be honourable and important people in Israel. And David listens to this. He listens to this speech, and it astonishes him. It astonishes him that Saul would make a promise like that, because he thinks nothing of Goliath. Verse 26. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Okay, Israel's men said that Goliath was defying them. They meant that he was insulting them. But David, who used the same word, changes the meaning. He says that Goliath is defying the armies of the living God. Israel is God's people. Its armies are the armies that God leads and guides and directs into battle. So when Goliath defies the armies of the living God, Goliath is blaspheming. He's speaking evil words against God and the army that he has appointed. And what right does Goliath have to speak those words? Goliath is an uncircumcised Philistine. Circumcision, you'll remember, is the operation that Abraham accepted for himself and for his children and for the descendants of the children after him. A minor operation to remove the little skin from the male sex part, but an operation that distinguished Israel's people from the other nations on earth, and in particular from the Philistines. There they are, without a relationship with God, serving false gods, and they dare. This Goliath dares to speak against the armies of the living God. That man is speaking against God, and God himself will act against this man. Verse 27, and the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. Notice, they answer the question, what is the king going to do to honour the man who kills Goliath? They answer that question. They ignore the second part of the question. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? But Eliab, David's oldest brother, hears what David says, and it's that second part that horrifies him. It's that second part that horrifies him because these are dangerous words. If David means what he says, if he stands by what he says, then David himself will put his life at risk by fighting Goliath. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Eliab sees that David believes that God is on his side. Verse 28, and Eliab, his eldest brother, heard what he spake to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. It was kindled, it burned like fire. He was furious with David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither? Why did you come here? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? You've abandoned your sheep in the wilderness, in the wild place. With who have you left them? Well, David left them with the keeper who was paid to look after them. But Eliab says to David, I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come that thou mightest see the battle. You've just come to please yourself, to watch on while men fight and are killed. You're proud, you're naughty, you're not behaving, you're just doing what you want to do. There's no respect here, no respect at all for David, whom Samuel anointed king in the presence of David's brothers, and which was confirmed by Saul's decision to appoint David to a position in his palace. No respect at all for David, no respect for his authority as one on whom the Spirit of God rests, to speak and to declare God's message against Goliath, the enemy of Israel. And David replies to Eliab, his brother. Verse 29, and David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? You're accusing me. You're accusing me of wrongdoing, but there is a cause. There is a reason. There is a matter. There are things that need to be said on this occasion. There is a speech that needs to be made. And this Goliath needs to know that what he is doing is evil and wrong. He should not be standing against God or against his armies. Now, normally, in these talks, I encourage you to repent, to turn from your wrong actions and to turn to God. But if you've declared something that is right and good, there is no reason for you to repent from what you have said that is right and good. And David is uncompromising with his oldest brother. He doesn't repent of his words. He is determined. He repeats them again and again. Verse 30, and he turned from him. David turned from his oldest brother toward another. And he spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the former manner. Yes, David knew what he was speaking. He knew about the power of God. He knew that God was on his side. He wasn't afraid of Goliath. He only feared the living God, the God of Israel. And perhaps for this opportunity, God had sent David down on this day to hear the proud and evil words of Goliath. Part 2, the actual battle, will be following, I trust, in the next talk. But in the meantime, I'm going to read to you now the passage we've just been looking at, 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 1 to 30. First, my email address, 333kjv@gmail.com. That's 333kjv@gmail.com. Please tell me where in the world you are, if in America, which of the states. And now here is the whole of that passage. First book of Samuel, chapter 17, verses 1 to 30, in the King James Bible. Now, the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had an helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now, David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. And he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next him Aminadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days. And Jesse said to David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they, and all the men of Israel, were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner.